Part 28. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 271. Chapter 271 Having trouble sleeping and eating. High school life is boring and busy, and in order to achieve his own goals, Tangwan shortened such a serious campus time to 2 years. For her, the shorter the days she lives in school, the more things she needs to do. When Tangwan finally entered the second year of high school, she had completed all the high school courses. The student union also has a better successor. When the positions were handed over, all the students were a little reluctant to leave. They were young and did not know that some people would never see each other again in their lifetime, going their separate ways for the sake of their future. It's a perfectly normal thing. At the final graduation ceremony, Tangwan looked at the familiar faces below and walked onto the stage that was familiar to her for the last time. Reciting the speech I wrote last night. But looking at their eyes, Tangwan felt that what she had thought about last night was too superficial and could not really respond to their current expressions and their expectations, so she put down the manuscript in her hand and acted on the spot. Life will always face countless choices, and each choice will lead to 2 different endings or more endings. Choices of events will be faced at various places in our lives. The me you see now is exactly the choice I have made unswervingly for my goals. Maybe in another parallel time and space, the life I choose is not like this. I made countless choices before I met you all at an accidental node. What I mean by saying this is actually because I want to say. Tangwan dragged out the last sentence a little too long. She glanced over it. The students below looked at them with expectant eyes and finally said the last few words. I mean, I'm happy to meet you all here and have a great time being a student with you all. Now I just want to send you a message, and also the classmates who left this school with me. I hope you all have a bright future and are invincible. I also wish you all to shine in your respective fields. Don't worry if you have no friends in the future, no one in the world will know you. The students present sent farewell to Tangwan's senior class with their own eyes. Perhaps the teachers and students present understood that they would never meet such a brilliant person again in the rest of their lives. They will never meet someone who can single-handedly change the operation of the entire school, and can also decide the future of more students on their own. Her decision-making is for the benefit of the majority and to protect the weak few. She has achieved extreme fairness and protected the rights of everyone within the rules. She lived a transparent and extremely wise life. That's why it seemed that the classmates present were reluctant to leave her. Especially the members of the student union, they cried uncontrollably as they watched Tangwan leave. But in the end, Tangwan was allowed to leave, even though many of them wanted to reach out and hold Tangwan. Because they know that for Tangwan, there is nothing left to teach her in high school, and she needs to go to a broader world. After the graduation ceremony, Tangwan ushered in the longest summer vacation in his life, and also the most leisurely one. She has no summer homework and can go out and play everywhere. However, Tangwan has not been abroad for a long time since he learned about the Brown family, and this time the whole family was fully prepared, getting ready for a long-awaited trip abroad. But when they were about to set off, they found that they had been left behind by those children. The only ones who set off together were Tangwan, Fu Wenzi, and Lu Ziyi. There are many people who don't have one. At first, Fu Wenzi didn't want to take Lu Ziyi with him, but there was no way. Lu Ziyi hadn't received a reply from Go 11 for more than 2 months. He looked extremely anxious and about to explode on the spot. Looking at Lu Ziyi, who was about to behave in a stereotyped manner, Fu Wenzi felt a rare sense of compassion, and the friendship that was about to disappear suddenly came online. So he took Lu Ziyi on a trip abroad, hoping that this time their trip could relieve Lu Ziyi's anxious mood. It was only when they got on the plane that they discovered that Lu Ziyi's mood had not eased, but had become more serious. Lu Ziyi checks his phone almost every 10 minutes to see if Go 11 has texted him back. Finally Fu Wenzi couldn't stand it any longer, so he confiscated Lu Ziyi's cell phone and locked it. Lu Ziyi wanted to say something else, but he also knew that Fu Wenzi was doing this for his own good, so in the end he could only retract his hand with an ugly expression, sat back in his seat, and looked at the clouds outside the window without saying anything. Tang Wan also knew that any comfort would be in vain before she received a reply, so all she could do was sit next to Lu Ziyi and ease his anxiety. In the end, Lu Ziyi couldn't control himself anymore and said to Tang Wan, "She is so powerful, she should be fine, right?" Lu Ziyi didn't wait for Tang Wan's answer and said to himself, "It must be okay, she is the most powerful." Seeing Lu Ziyi like this, Tang Wan just frowned without adding fuel to the fire, but took out a bottle of water and handed it to Lu Ziyi. He said something, "Yes, Zixi is the most powerful, nothing will happen to her." Soon Tang Wan heard the people around him closing their eyes and mumbling Buddhist terms, trying to use this method to relieve the anxiety in his heart and pray for Go 11's safety. Tang Wan did not laugh at Lu Ziyi. Knowing that when people are extremely uneasy, they can only use this method to calm themselves and gain a sense of peace of mind. This time the flight took 5 hours. We arrived at our destination soon. After waiting for the destination, Lu Ziyi's first action was to take back his mobile phone from Fu Wenzi, turned it on, and frowned even more when he looked at the empty information bar in the mobile phone. "Where did Go 11 go? Why haven't you replied to the message?" Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi dragged the distraught Lu Ziyi to the hotel they booked, registered their check-in information, and went out to sea together. Originally, he planned to take a rest, but seeing how troubled Lu Ziyi was, he probably couldn't sleep either, so he came to watch the sea and relax from a distance. "Perhaps this will make you feel better." But when Lu Ziyi stood on the deck, Lu Ziyi looked at the rough sea and suddenly said something. "Did you two know something that made you choose this place?" Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi did not speak. He then heard Lu Ziyi say, "According to your two personalities, you will never do useless work. You have always been people who want to get multiple rewards for doing one thing." End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 272. Chapter 272. The storm is coming. Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi heard Lu Ziyi's words and did not answer him immediately. And Lu Ziyi has long been used to them being like this. He actually doesn't really expect an answer, he just wants to talk to people. He knew that his IQ was not as good as his two friends, and he also knew that his sense of danger was not as keen as theirs. He also knew that if he knew too much, he would probably cause more accidents. Maybe the endings they prepared will suddenly disappear. Any disturbance will cause the results to be biased. But this time Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi only thought about it for a moment and then told Lu Ziyi, "I do know something about Zixi's whereabouts. But it's not in the sea area, but on a small island not far from the sea area. The current environment is no longer as good as the environment a few decades ago. They don't have the courage. They feel like something will happen at this time. Most of the small islands are private islands, and those with names are difficult to manipulate. But this time we don't confirm whether the news is true or false. We can only come and take a look first. We didn't explain it clearly to you because we were afraid that it would disappoint you if it was false news." Tang Wan said all these words to Lu Ziyi in a hurry. Firstly, because he saw that Lu Ziyi had become a little thin and disfigured these days, and he was really worried. Secondly, because she is quite familiar with the sea area. This is the place where there was an explosion before, injuring myself and my father. However, the island has been abandoned over the years, and the surrounding neighbors have sold the island and run away because of this incident. Although some things were not done by themselves, who is not afraid of the revenge of that calm madman Sci-fi? Some people are even doubting the authenticity of this explosion. Maybe Sci-fi just wants to find a reason to torture them so as to sanction their influence in domestic business. By the way, I would like to warn them not to act rashly or do anything illegal. So this small island is almost deserted. Tang Wan was the first to be dealt with on the island, where he seemed to see a familiar figure. Moreover, the way it was handled was so simple and crude that she was familiar with it, and the entire island was directly blown up. This approach is undoubtedly not telling Tang Wan that the Brown family did what happened, and they are not even willing to write a perfunctory reason. It's really unreasonably arrogant. So Tang Wan actually doesn't have a good impression of the sea area at all. If news about Go-11 really appeared in the sea area, then Tang Wan would have every reason to suspect that the Brown family was most likely responsible for this incident. They are the only ones who like to do messy things on the sea, and they are the only ones who are familiar with this island. Thinking of this, Tang Wan withdrew his gaze and looked at the stormy sea, feeling a wave of emotion in his heart. So this time she and the Brown family still have a tough battle to fight. On the other side, the West Coast Islands. How many people walked onto this silent island, wearing black suits and with the same tattoos on their arms, and some of them had tattoos on their fragile necks. Surrounded among them was a young boy with a cigarette in his hand and white hair hanging on his eyelids, looking a little lazy. The young man looked at the cruise ship not far away, twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "Why haven't you made any progress in these years, and you still like to compete with me on the sea? Don't they know that the Brown family's maritime industry ranks among the top in the world?" 3. The young man is none other than Full Brown. There was a bit of ruthlessness in his unruly expression, and he was very skillful in turning the gun in his hand. It was obvious that he was playing with it from time to time. The bodyguards around him didn't say a word, they just stared at their young master to prevent him from going crazy at any time. Fall has not been to the sea area for many years, but he is very familiar with the sea. After all, every year, their family will feed into these seas to make the creatures in the sea live healthier, more comfortable, and stronger. He held the binoculars, looked at the cruise ship not far away, and muttered, "Tang Tang has caused our family to lose a lot of business over the years. How do you think I should repay the gifts Tang Tang gave me?" Fur's Mandarin is getting better and better, at least now he can speak the sentence without any of his previous accent. The bodyguard standing next to him naturally knew that his young master did not want to get a reply from him, he just enjoyed the pleasure of saying it to scare people. But soon, Fur's next words made him feel like he was facing an enemy. "I want to ask you something, Go-11." The bodyguard standing next to Fur looked at Fur innocently. But he spoke in proficient Spanish. "Do you know who you are talking about? Who is Go-11?" His expression looked so sincere that it didn't look like he was lying. Of course the more important thing is because Go-11 is a girl, and Fur's bodyguards are all men. Gender is different. This made Fur a little confused. Is the news he received true or false? In fact, he just said this suddenly just to blow up the bodyguards around him, because the news said that the bodyguards around him had a note. And this note was none other than his favorite Tang Tang's best friend. He has always taken people related to Tang Tang into his heart, and he can't wait to see them in his eyes. That's why Full said such words and wanted to ask, but he didn't expect that it wouldn't explode. Is it possible that my hidden line was wrong? Although Fur thought so in his heart, he did not show it on his face. Instead, he nodded casually, spread his hands, and looked like he was just saying it as a joke. "Don't be so nervous. I was just joking. After all, Go-11 is a girl, and you are all men, right?" Even at this time, Fur did not forget to look at the expressions of the people around him, trying to see some clues in their eyes. But I found that their expression management was very successful, and no one had any strange expressions. Fur couldn't help but sneer in his heart, then looked at the cruise ship in the distance, and said seemingly casually, "Tang Tang and her friends are on the cruise ship. Let's go meet them later." From the corner of his eye, Fur looked at the bodyguards beside him and found that they just nodded and nodded without any other action, which made him feel a little bored. Could it be that Go-11 was not in this group of bodyguards, but in the other group of bodyguards who were not brought ashore? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 273. Chapter 273. I hope the evil will disappear. With such thoughts in mind, for now looks like Go-11. But he looked around and felt that he was surrounded by tall and strong men. How could there be a little girl of 15 or 16 next to him? It would be too obvious if he was discovered. With this thought, Fur walked out and no longer looked at the group of bodyguards behind him. The surroundings were calm again, but Tang Wan glanced at the small island here vaguely. It was like discovering Fur's sight just now, and it was like a coincidence. Just happened to take a look. As for Fu Wenzi next to Tang Wan, he really didn't even turn his eyes, he only looked at Tang Wan in front of him. As for the elders who have been forgotten in the country, they can only come here by other means of transportation to look for these little cubs. They simply couldn't imagine what outrageous things these little brats could do when they weren't watching them. Anyway, Tang Wan had already shown them before, and Fu Wenzi would not be around to deal with it at all. He would only intensify his efforts to make Tang Wan do even more cruel things. In the past, everyone thought Fu Wenzi was a rational person. Now I feel that there is no sense in him, he just doesn't care about other people. He only has candy in his eyes. Tang Tang is the direction of his life. He would walk wherever Tang Tang pointed, and hit wherever pointed. He was even more precise than aiming. Lu Lin's eyes darkened when he thought of this, and he said, "Hurry up and locate their location, otherwise we will be in trouble." He always felt that if he didn't find these three cubs quickly, things would not end well later. As Lu Lin expected, Tang Wan, Lu Ziyi and Fu Wenzi had already touched the island. They found a relatively large hiding spot with a somewhat sneaky pace, and then took out several small mechanical puppies from their backpacks. Looking at the mechanical puppies walking into the grass and starting to search the surrounding locations, these mechanical puppies are much more sophisticated than the search puppies a few years ago, and they are even equipped with automatic detection and explosion systems. If you make the slightest mistake, it can explode on the spot, which is basically a one-and-done thing. It is really a must-have at home and indispensable when traveling. The good thing about this mechanical puppy is that it is not for sale. Military products are only available to military personnel. Lu Ziyi was a little moved when he saw such a puppy. Just when he was about to ask how much it would cost, he found that Tang Wan made a silent gesture to him. He knew that this matter was non-negotiable and he couldn't buy it. Lu Ziyi didn't think there was anything wrong. After all, the state had national laws, the family had family rules, and there were too many things that he couldn't get. He had long been accustomed to it. It's just that I'm still a little greedy looking at the puppy in front of me. Tang Wan's eyes were not on Lu Ziyi, but focused on everything in front of him. Finally, they saw the scene of the innermost building through the surveillance camera on the mechanical puppy. But it's a pity that the mechanical puppy just showed its head and was discovered by the people inside. With no other choice, Tang Wan had no choice but to press the self-destruct button and let the puppy expose himself in front of them all at once without leaving any traces. Even his fingerprints could not be discovered by them. And their actions also alarmed the group of people on the island. They began to search the island, trying to find the uninvited guests who came here. Lu Ziyi came to this island for the first time, and of course he didn't know where to hide. Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi seemed to have been here many times. He naturally found a road and hid in it, which surprised Lu Ziyi. He asked in sign language. "You seem to have been here for a long time, are you interested in talking to me?" What he meant was that these people found some toys behind his back, but did not tell him. His friends are good at everything, but sometimes they don't like to talk to him when they find interesting things, which makes him extremely sad. But he also knew that Tangwan and the others were just trying to protect themselves, so no matter how much dissatisfaction he had, he could only swallow it. The island suddenly changed from quiet to lively, and everyone began to look for traces of the uninvited guests. Tangwan and Fu Wenzi took Lu Ziyi and hid tightly, allowing the people in front to come and go many times without discovering where they were. Suddenly a pair of feet stopped in front of them, which made Lu Ziyi take a deep breath and shrink back in fear. Some strange emotions arose in his heart. He didn't know why. He always felt that these feet were a little small, not as big as those of other people. Tangwan and Fu Wenzi, however, walked out as if they had seen someone related to them. Walk. Going out? Lu Ziyi subconsciously stretched out his hand to catch his two friends, but found that they were walking faster. Ah, no, this. Lu Ziyi naturally couldn't let his friends face danger while he hid here, so he also walked out. As soon as he looked up, he found a shorter man wearing a bodyguard suit standing in front of him. To be honest, this body looks much shorter than those bodyguards, and he is not as strong as them. He looks a little thin. But for some reason this bodyguard gave him a familiar feeling. Sudden. The bodyguard took off her sunglasses, revealing a pair of eyebrows that were familiar to Lu Ziyi. Lu Ziyi could hardly control his voice and wanted to call out her name, but she covered his mouth. It was Go-11 who had not responded to messages for a long time. Hush, keep your voice down. Lu Ziyi blinked his eyes vigorously, indicating that he would stay quiet. So stop holding his nose, he's almost out of breath. Go-11 put down his hand after seeing the recording looking so uncomfortable, then looked at Tangwan and whispered, "We have almost deployed the place, and his problem has been found and action can be taken. This location is already in our territory, and we have discovered what they did." Go-11's words were very vague, obscuring the important information inside. How can there be any vegetarians who can do these murderous and illegal things on the high seas? There are so many things they can do for those interests. Go-11's heart has become harder and harder over the years, and she has become more and more resentful towards these people. She wished that one day there would be no such evil things in the world. There is no way. Once there is a gap between rich and poor in this world, these things will always exist. End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 274. Chapter 274. Long time no see. Happy desires are endless. Desire will never be satisfied, so these things will never end. Neither Tangwan nor Fu Wenzi were willing to tell Lu Ziyi these things. Even Go-11 is like this. Lu Ziyi is already used to it, and he is also used to his friends not telling him these things. Everyone has their own things to do, and everyone is doing the right thing. Of course, he will not hold his friends back. They support each other, and this life is still very long. Everyone did not stay where they were for too long, but quickly exchanged the information and tools in their hands, and then prepared to leave. Just before leaving, Lu Ziyi paused for a moment, then turned around and looked at Go-11 behind him, rushed forward and gave him a hug, and finally said, "Protect yourself, and I will celebrate your birthday. Your birthday is coming soon, and I have prepared a gift for you that you like very much." After speaking, Lu Ziyi left here without looking back. He knew that staying here was of no use, so he didn't want to cause them any more troubles. He didn't even reveal the sadness and worry in his heart, just on the way back. Very silent all the time. Neither Tangwan nor Fu Wenzi bothered him at this time. But not long after, Lu Ziyi returned to normal, and he asked, "These things we do are meaningful, right? These things must come to an end, right? Everyone will come back, right?" Lu Ziyi's voice became softer and softer, until finally there was a hint of crying in his voice. Tang Wan walked up to him and answered firmly. Yes. Everything we do is meaningful, life will get better and better, and everyone will come back. We will definitely drive out all these dangers. Victory will definitely belong to us. They did not waste too much time and quickly ran to the landing position. The location where they landed was on a remote path, and their boat was parked there. It's just that the more Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi walked, the more they felt that something was wrong with this road. It seemed a little too quiet. It was so quiet that someone was waiting for them there on purpose. Thinking of this, Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi looked at each other, then looked at Lu Ziyi beside them, and made a decision. Tang Wan put Lu Ziyi on another, more remote shore. It was an emergency lifeboat prepared by Go 11 and others. Only one person could sit in the lifeboat. Tang Wan pushed Lu Ziyi onto the lifeboat, and then said, "You go back first, we have something to do, and we will catch up soon." "What's the matter?" Lu Ziwen was not as deceived as before. He subconsciously stretched out his hand to grab Tang Wan and ask him what the matter was. However, Tang Wan's speed was too fast for him to catch him. Fu Wenzi knew that Tang Wan was not used to lying to his relatives, so this time it was up to him to make up a reason. "It's nothing, I just suddenly realized that I missed something for Go 11. Now go back and give it to him. You get on the boat first, we will come later." Out of trust in his friends and because the environment here really made Lu Ziyi a little nervous, he nodded and let them go without thinking about it. Lu Ziyi rowed the lifeboat and headed towards the cruise ship. Behind him, Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi walked into the jungle again. They knew that once they left, it would be difficult to look back. He also knew that Fur's men were ambushing him in the jungle. They were discovered and had absolutely no reason to look back. Or should I say, Tang Wan has been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Say that you don't care and you will protect yourself. But only Fu Wenzi knew that Tang Wan had never given up on killing his enemy for a moment. Just as he felt before the conversation, Tang Wan may be really calm, but she is also crazy. Like herself, she has a sense of disapproval of this social system, but she is willing to abide by this order for her family and everything she cares about. But once anyone touches her reverse scales, she will definitely make that person pay the price. In a reasonable range, completely crazy, this is Tang Wan. It's just that Tang Wan is always hidden by her like this on weekdays. She looks no different from normal people, and even has a higher sense of morality than normal people. But few people know what it actually looks like. However, there is an old saying that is correct: a gentleman judges his deeds, regardless of his thoughts, and no man is perfect. In a sense, Tang Wan is the person closest to the title of gentleman. At this moment, Tang Wan suddenly spoke. "Do you regret it?" Fu Wenzi knew what Tang Wan meant by asking this sentence. Was she asking herself whether she regretted entering such a dangerous place with him? According to his own life trajectory, he could have become a carefree young master and the heir to 2 groups. There was absolutely no need for him to come to such a dangerous place, where he Tang Wan was going through life and death, doing the most deviant things in the world. But Fu Wenzi just smiled and replied, "Never regretted it." The life of a backwater is not suitable for Fu Wenzi. He has always wanted to have a dream that can break this ordinary life. His wish was tightly sealed and hidden in his boring skin until Tang Wan appeared and he discovered another side of the world. He wanted to enter Tang Wan's world and observe the world with Tang Wan. From childhood to now, he has never regretted it. Even, he was grateful to Tang Wan. "It was Tang Wan who made me feel that the world is colorful and has various appearances." Thinking of this, Fu Wenzi took Tang Wan's hand and walked into the woods together, looking at the bodyguards swarming in front of him. He spoke calmly. "Don't be afraid, they don't dare." After so many years, the Brown family has long been in decline. Their godfather has died, and the only one left now is just a young wolf that has not grown up. There are more people who want this position. In their eyes, this position is not something that can be achieved by blood. They rely on strength. However, no matter how teenagers can suppress those veterans, their internal conflicts have long been irreconcilable, and Fur has no way to mobilize so many people. It's just that Fur is still living in the sweet dream left by his godfather, but soon he will wake up from the dream. The entire Brown family is like a gorgeous skirt, covered with lice, and will fall apart if you tear it lightly. Fur walked over surrounded by bodyguards. He looked at Tangwan in front of him, with a somewhat sad expression on his face. "Hello, like an old friend. Haven't seen you for a long time." The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 275. Chapter 275 3 years and 3 years. Tangwan didn't want to see Fur at this time. Or perhaps, she just wanted to see Fur in the prison. When Tangwan was sure that the death of his elder was inseparable from the Brown family, Tangwan had always wanted to see Fur in prison. It's a pity that Tangwan's simple wish has not been realized today, but they met on Fur's territory. However, there was no fear on Tangwan's face. Instead, he walked in front of Fur and covered Fu Wenzi behind him. Fur saw Tangwan's movements, and the smiling expression on his face dropped, revealing a somewhat ferocious look. What he said became more and more cold. "Why is he, a man, still hiding behind you? I didn't expect that your relationship would still be so good after so many years." Tangwan frowned slightly when he heard Fur's words. He didn't understand why there were so many sarcastic words in his words. It sounded weird and made people a little unaccustomed to it. Fu Wenzi, standing behind Tangwan, saw the jealousy in Fur's eyes and smiled clearly. The first sentence was, "I didn't expect that after so many years, you are still so lonely, and you don't even have a good friend. Are you jealous?" Fu Wenzi doesn't usually speak like this, but he has always been sensitive to human nature and knows how to speak to make people more uncomfortable. So when he said these words, he also succeeded in making the expression on Fur's face become even more distorted. Fleur once had friends. Just because their families were developing in different directions, he and his friend drifted apart. He also wanted to be friends with Tangwan, but Tangwan had always been wary of him. He had never entered Tangwan's world, so it was naturally impossible for him to be friends with Tangwan. But as he gradually observed Tangwan's life, he had other thoughts about Tangwan. He didn't want to be friends with Tangwan. He wanted to have a closer relationship with Tangwan, but he couldn't get close to Tangwan at all. So he has nothing. At the end of the past 10 years, he didn't have a single friend. Even Fu Wenzi knew that beside Tangwan, he had a unique position that was exclusive to him. This is the position that Fur has always wanted and always envied. But Fur also knew that he would never be able to enter Tangwan's world. Just like light and darkness, they are always on opposite sides. This is the outcome that was destined from the beginning. The bodyguards standing next to Fur were a little confused when they heard their daily conversations. But they were careful about their employer's request, so they stayed by Fur's side. Fu glanced at Tangwan, and the expression there was so complicated that Tangwan was even a little moved. If he didn't really know what kind of person Fur was, Tangwan would really feel aggrieved by Fur. The complicated expression in his eyes only flashed for a moment, and soon turned into the usual indifferent expression, looking at everyone as if they were looking at dead things. Let Tangwan have some misconceptions, maybe it was just his own misunderstanding. Suddenly, a red aiming point shot out from the nearby woods and was aimed at Fur's eyebrows. The bodyguards around are very alert. At the moment when the gunfire rang out, the bodyguards rushed to Tangwan's side instead of Fur's side. Tangwan slowly opened his eyes and looked at the bodyguard who wanted to rush towards him, feeling a little confused. But all this happened so quickly, even Tangwan, who reacted so quickly, was a little down at this moment. Fu Wenzi was faster than the bodyguards and immediately protected Tang Wan under him. Just when everything disappeared, people came out of the darkness and came to Tang Wan and the others. It was Go 11 who had just left and returned. He was holding a gun in his hand, followed by soldiers in civilian clothes. They came to Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi together. Go 11 stretched out her hand to pull Tang Wan up. The soldiers around him also escorted the mercenaries into the car. As for Fur, Tang Wan walked up to him, looked at his open eyes, and asked, "What's the point of doing this? Don't you want me to come in front of you a long time ago? Now that I appear in front of you, you would behave like this. I can't understand it." Fur used his last bit of strength to look at Tang Wan's face, twitching the corners of his mouth and revealing a smile. He didn't say anything, didn't do anything, and then slowly closed his eyes. Tang Wan doesn't need to know her own thoughts, and she doesn't need to have anything to do with people like herself. The Brown family should not exist in the new world. He is the loser of this game. In this highly profitable arena, whoever gets emotional first will be the loser, and he lost miserably 10 years ago. He knows that Tang Wan is good looking and cute. It is also someone who is absolutely impossible for him to get involved and out of his reach. But it doesn't matter, let him use his own death to let Tang Wan welcome the light with dignity and dignity. Her name should not be false, and neither should her life be false. Life is one giant puppet show. Many years ago, the puppet show he took Tang Wan to watch was about to come to an end. It's just that this time he is not watching the show from the audience, but a puppet performing on the stage. On the opposite coast, the century-old mafia family was also involved in a violent explosion, and the entire island was razed to the ground. The height of the entire island has been reduced by more than 1 meter. The Brown family also completely disappeared here. No one mentions the tough and ruthless young master, and no one knows why he turned the mafia that was supposed to be prosperous into what it is now within 5 years of inheriting the family. He is dead and has no answer. 3 years later, Tang Wan has changed his name to Si Wan. The deeds of the Xue family were finally known to everyone. That cold cemetery finally welcomed more people. Those monuments without bones inside are all the places where the souls of their dead people are placed. And people will no longer say that Tang Wan is an orphan without a father and mother. She may have another name. Children of Martyrs. This is a family that has been fighting against darkness for more than 40 years, and now only Tang Wan is left. As for the Chen family, they have begun to return to China one after another in recent years. However, they can no longer access core technologies, but they can still do some simple drug agents. Chen Chuo walked out of the nursing home and started an ordinary high school life. That's right. When everyone entered college, only Chen Chuo had not graduated from high school. Today is Chen Chuo's graduation ceremony. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 276. Chapter 276. Tang Tang, don't be so straightforward. Chen Chuo looked at his friends who had gone to college and graduated from college around him, with a little dissatisfaction on his cold and handsome face. Especially Lu Ziyi, who was next to him in fancy clothes and looking like he was about to walk down the catwalk, rolled his eyes at him. The words in his mouth still had the familiar venom. Why are you dressed so nicely today for your graduation ceremony? Are you trying to seduce some girl? Hey, no, 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 no. I have no intention of seduce a little girl. I dress so well just to give you face. Isn't this just to show off for you? Look at Wenzi next to me, isn't he well dressed? Fu Wenzi has become more and more restrained over the years. When he smiles, he looks a bit like Mr. Fu. At this time, those eyes that showed no smile at all looked very much like the Pei family. Thinking of this, Chen Zhuo suddenly said, "No, it's been so many years, and your parents haven't remarried yet." Fu Wenzi was a little surprised when he heard that Chen Zhuo suddenly asked such a gossip. Then he said, "No. Not only did they not remarry, they had a quarrel some time ago. One went to the southernmost point of the earth, and the other went to the northernmost point." However, Fu Wenzi did not say the sentence. He just knew these things himself. Besides, he has long been accustomed to his parents' inconspicuous behavior over the years. He can take good care of himself, so he doesn't care about those two. If he had the same expectations for his parents as other children, he would definitely not grow as big as he does now. Most likely died in childhood. Seeing Fu Wenzi's indifferent expression, Chen Zhuo restrained himself and wanted to ask further. After all, every family has sutras that are difficult to recite, but this sutra in Fu Wenzi's family is the most difficult to recite. At this moment, several noises suddenly came from the door. It was Go 11 and Si1 who walked in. Si1 has become more and more beautiful in recent years. It is obvious that many children from the four families have started to draw red lines for themselves and want to fall in love with Si1 for the purpose of marriage. It's just a pity that their love is often interrupted before it even begins. After all, if you want to come to Si1's side, you must first lower your head to see if you are worthy. Those who can be friends with Si1 are all excellent people. First of all, there is Fu Wenzi, the heir of the Fu family and the Pei family. He has brought the two families to a higher level by himself. Who dares to look down on him? He not only inherited the smiling face of the Pei family, but also the unscrupulous, cold, and arrogant attitude of the Fu family. When he does things, he smiles in front of his face but stabs him in the back, which is extremely cruel. But these are only minor things. If you say something bad to Si1 in front of him, it will really kill you. He was so protective of his shortcomings that no one dared to say anything bad about Si1 in front of him. As for Lu Ziyi, he inherited the Lu family. As the most outstanding junior of the Lu family, although he is not as good as a genius like Fu Wenzi, he is still far ahead of ordinary people. First of all, Lu Ziyi has a very clear self-understanding of himself. There are many people who cannot match this alone. Many people can't tell how much they weigh, and their understanding of themselves is quite unclear. Their hearts are always as high as the sky, and their lives are as thin as paper. Although Lu Ziyi always says that he is not as good as his friends, in fact he is also very good. Or rather, it should be said that Lu Ziyi was because the Si1 and Fu Wenzi he came into contact with were so outstanding that he was a little too humble about his own self-knowledge. Not to mention Chen Zhuo and Go 11, both of them are from the Red N generation. It's called a storm in doing things on weekdays. Extremely excellent and beyond ordinary people. In other words, if you want to get close to Si1, you must be at least as good as his friends, but there are too few who can be better than these few people. There are only a handful of them. Of course, some people have their eyes on Go 11, but often they are kicked far away by Go 11 without even revealing their purpose. Then it was Lu Ziyi and Go 11 playing mixed doubles together. Over time, everyone came to understand that Go 11 was not something they could even imagine. That young master of the Lu family has long been eyeing him. Since these people are ready to digest it internally, Why are they still claiming to be single? Isn't this just making fun of everyone? Their thoughts were soon overturned, because the young Master Lu was kicked out by Go 11. This is pretty much the same. But this happened several months ago, but now the atmosphere between the two of them is still a bit strange. It's not that there is an ambiguous atmosphere between them, but that young Master Lu seems to be a bit of a dog-legger. It's a little funny. Siwan looked at Lu Ziyi, who was trotting over, and then subconsciously glanced at Go 11 beside him. Thinking about what happened in the past few months, his rare eyes had a look of watching the fun. Yes, Siwan also heard about Lu Ziyi's confession to Go 11 that happened a few days ago. If Lu Ziyi was passionate about this matter and Go 11 didn't like it, Siwan would never make such a move. But Siwan soon discovered that Go 11 was not indifferent, she was just embarrassed. Growing up together, they were noisy and happy enemies, but suddenly one day the other person confessed to him and he was still obedient. That simply made Go 11 feel uncomfortable, as if there were ants crawling all over her body. But when she told Siwan about this matter, the expression on her face could not be deceiving. There are only two things in the world that cannot be hidden, one is coughing, and the other is liking. Even if you cover your mouth and like, it will slip out from your eyes. Go 11 clearly likes it. It's just that she didn't understand it herself. Siwan was not prepared to participate, she just didn't want Go 11 to miss it. So I asked at the appropriate time. Then if one day, Lu Ziyi brings a girl to you and says he likes her, how would you feel? At that moment, Siwan clearly felt that Go 11's expression was a little stiff. She turned her head and looked to the side, and then said, "What else can we do? Of course I wish him the best of luck in finding his true destiny." Siwan looked at Go 11, who had the toughest mouth in his body, and shrugged without saying anything. Go 11 also realized that Siwan had seen through her thoughts and said something coquettishly. "Tang Tang, don't say it so bluntly. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head?" Chapter 277. Chapter 277. He knew clearly and chased after him. Siwan spread his hands with an innocent look on his face, and then said jokingly, "What did I say? You just talked about me like this, but I didn't say a word." Go 11 thought for a moment, then reached out and poked Siwan on the shoulder, muttering in a low voice, "What about you and Fu Wenzi?" Fu Wenzi, Siwan looked at Go 11 strangely, not knowing why. Siwan has accurate cognition and keen perception of other people's feelings, but she is much slower towards her own feelings. And Go 11 looked at Siwan's confused look and realized that Siwan in front of her was not kidding her. She fell back a little unbearably, but did not point this matter out. Some things are interesting only if you realize them yourself, not to mention seeing Fu Wenzi being defeated is what these friends like to see the most. Who is called Fu Wenzi? He has been someone else's child since he was a child, so he is always compared with them. And it can't be compared. Siwan looked at Go 11, who suddenly couldn't speak clearly, and gave her a strange look. This matter is over. After the recollection, Siwan looked at Lu Ziyi, who was running toward him, and slowly turned sideways, giving him space. He himself went to another place, picked up the most delicious cake at the banquet, and put it into his mouth. And Fu Wenzi had been following Siwan quietly since unknown time, holding a glass of wine. Looking at the pastry in Siwan's hand, he said with great interest, "I like this pastry so much. I've seen you eat it several times." Siwan didn't even raise his head, and then said, "The sweetness of this pastry is just right. Sometimes I also want to lure the Chen family's cook to our house, but it's a pity that it is not kind." Fu Wenzi nodded when he heard this, and said somewhat casually, "But I heard some time ago that their chef has resigned, and now the people who make this pastry are his apprentices." Siwan quickly turned his head when he heard this, looked at Fu Wenzi with surprise and said, "Really? Has he joined another company now? If not, I will go find him." Fu Wenzi looked at Siwan, who was a little excited all of a sudden, and realized how wise his decision was to abduct the master to his home. With the pastries made by the chef as a topic, I and Siwan have more time and excuses to communicate. Thinking of this, Fu Wenzi said without further concealment, "He has now joined our family. If you want to eat this pastry from now on, you can just come to my house." While saying this, Fu Wenzi kept looking at Siwan, trying to see some other expression in her eyes, but there was none. Siwan's eyes were emotionless and calm. Fu Wenzi immediately realized that Siwan was not enlightened yet, and he needed to make persistent efforts to make her think differently about him. In the end, Fu Wenzi could only ruffle Siwan's hair as usual, and said with a smile, "You haven't answered me yet, would you like to come to my house?" Siwan shook his shoulders and wanted to shake off the troublesome hand on his head. In the end, he could only swallow his anger and said for the pastry, "It's not like I won't go to your house, why do I need to say such things?" Fu Wenzi certainly knew that Siwan would not reject him, but he wanted to hear a different answer from Siwan's mouth. But Siwan was too slow about feelings. No matter how many times Fu Wenzi hinted at it, Siwan still couldn't understand it. However, Fu Wenzi has always been very patient. He grew up with Siwan and missed so many ups and downs. Naturally, he will not let go at this time, so he can only say one thing. "I just want to see if you have other expressions and why you are so serious." Siwan rolled his eyes when he heard this, and then ignored Fu Wenzi. Naturally, there will be no other adults at this high school graduation ceremony. The children drank a lot of wine, and Luzi was holding Go 11 and crying loudly. "Can you please tell me that you are safe next time you go to a dangerous place? Even if you don't want to talk to me, you should have an emergency button on you and press it when you need me. Or just to say hello, just click it, don't say anything, don't ignore me." As Luzi spoke, he kept rubbing himself against Go 11 with red eyes, like a big coquettish dog. The classmates around him looked at him with strange eyes, as if they were watching the fun. They had never seen the heir of the Lu family like this before. The way he is trapped by love is no different from other students. Go 11 blushed so much that she kept walking outside, trying to get rid of this person on her body. But Luzi didn't know what kind of dolly pill he had taken, and his strength had become stronger and stronger in the past few years. The two pairs of hands holding Go 11 were like indestructible pliers, motionless. Normally when Go 11 was blocked like this, Siwan would have already stepped forward to help. But this time, Siwan just stood there, watching the tug in front of her without moving. Fu Wenzi, who was standing next to her, made no movement. "Why don't you go up and help Go 11? Siwan shook his head. Then he took a sip of the juice. If Zixi really didn't like it, she would have shouted at me to start a fight. I obviously like it, but it's hard to say anything. Siwan can understand Go 11's mood. Perhaps understanding Go 11's mood is like understanding her mother and father. One of them is destined to encounter danger. They know clearly that there are tigers in the mountains, so they prefer to go to the tiger mountains. This is the path Go 11 has always chosen firmly, and she will never turn back because of the long love between her children. Not everyone is as lucky as his mother to be able to retire safely from a dangerous position. When many people return home, it may just be a small box, or it may be a business card that cannot even be preserved with the body, a string of numbers without emotion or warmth. Like one's own mother. Go 11 was also thinking about such a thing, so she never responded to Luzi. Those who are alive will always be eroded by sadness. Just like Siy. However, Fu Wenzi, who was standing next to Siwan, suddenly said, "Is it just because you are afraid that you refuse to start?" The outcome of everything is like an unopened Pandora's box. Only when you open it can you know what's inside the box. Lu Ziyi thought it through. He had already thought through all the consequences, but he still pursued her without hesitation. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 278. Chapter 278, Don't seek yourself a short circuit. Sci-Wan glanced at the cake in his hand and felt that the cake in his hand was not sweet at all. The real problem is always the insurmountable abyss between them. One person is outside and the other is inside, unable to get in or get out. They have all grown up, so naturally it is time to face these things. However, Fu Wenzi's voice still rang in Sci-Wan's ears, interrupting the sadness that had just arisen in her heart. There is no parallel in human courage. Difficulties should not become shackles to each other. They should turn into armor, be invincible, and move forward bravely. Fu Wenzi actually rarely said such positive words. Most of the words he said were rational and without much emotion, unless he was talking to Sci-Wan. Sci-Wan actually didn't expect that Fu Wenzi would be so optimistic about the relationship between Lu Ziyi and Go 11, which surprised her. Because Fu Wenzi does not seem to be such a soft person, how could he be so cautious, and even describe the beauty of feelings to himself in a dreamy tone? How incredible this is! Sci-Wan swallowed the last bit of cake in his hand. Her eyes fell on Go 11, but she saw Go 11 raising his hand, as if he was about to slap Lu Ziyi, who was hugging her, trying to wake up this man who was pretending to be crazy while drinking. Yes, Lu Ziyi's acting skills are not inherited at all from his younger uncles, but are incomparably worse. He wanted to pretend to be crazy while drinking, but his state seemed a bit strange. It was obvious at a glance that he was not drunk at all. However, Lu Ziyi just buried his face in his arms and shouted loudly to Go 11. I'll beat you if you have a temper. If you have a temper, beat me to death. I've been here for so many years, and I still care about you. Chen Shuo saw that something was wrong and took the surrounding students to another room. He looked at Lu Ziyi, who was rolling around with some disapproval in his eyes. Then he slowly shook his head and sighed. After all, he is his friend, no matter how bad he is, he must be tolerated. There is no other way. If you want to pursue a girl like Go 11, you have to live in a low position. Lu Ziyi almost put his face on the ground and stepped on it. Hearing what Lu Ziyi said, Go 11 suddenly said, "Don't you understand? I may lose my life at any time, I may die at any time." Lu Ziyi raised his head at this time, looked at Go 11, and said seriously, "Who won't die? Human beings have been heading toward death since birth. On the road to death, some people walk faster and some walk slower. I know your job is dangerous, but so what? Is it possible that because your job is dangerous, you have to avoid everything related to you? Can't all good things begin? This is not right." Lu Ziyi raised his head and looked at Go 11 with his eyes. "This is not right, 1111. You can't think like that, I do it willingly." Go 11 said nothing, but stubbornly stretched out her hand to pry Lu Ziyi's fingers apart one by one, then turned around and ran out the door. Lu Ziyi picked up his coat and said sorry to Chen Shuo behind him. "Good brother, next time we get together, I will make it up to you well next time." Chen Shuo looked at his back and nodded helplessly. He had already said this, what else could he do? "Of course I agree," and then make a big deal. As for Sci-Wan, watching the two people leaving, he subconsciously wanted to chase them out. However, Fu Wenzi took Sci-Wan's hand and whispered, "Tang Tang, you have to let them figure it out on their own and let them understand the importance of the other party." Sci-Wan always felt that Fu Wenzi was speaking for Lu Ziyi, and he also found evidence. However, at this time, he was pulled tightly and could not let go of Fu Wenzi's hand for a while. Although Sci-Wan has changed his name over the years, they are still used to calling Sci-Wan Tang Tang, as if this name is a unique little secret between them. Sci-Wan is used to it. The moment Fu Wenzi relaxed his guard, Sci-Wan broke away from Fu Wenzi's hand. I was immediately ready to rush out the door. But she felt dizzy, slipped and fell to the ground. Fu Wenzi's expression changed, and he hugged Sci-Wan quickly. His voice was unusually nervous. "What's wrong? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere?" Sci-Wan felt a little uncomfortable in his body and felt a little dizzy. Chenchuo, who was on the side, picked up Sci-Wan's wine glass, looked at the liquid inside, and suddenly said, "Tang Tang, why did you drink the wine as a drink? Didn't you even smell this very high alcohol content?" Sci-Wan's head is so dizzy now that he can't hear what he said. But because the pastry in his hand already had some alcoholic taste, when he drank the wine, he probably just regarded it as the taste of dessert. Fu Wenzi looked at Sci-Wan, who was lying in his arms like a limp noodle, his eyes darkened, and he led her to the villa next to him. However, this time, Chenchuo stopped Fu Wenzi. Chenchuo's expression was a little serious, and his tone was still cold. Even though the tone and words he spoke may not have the meaning of ridicule, it just matched his tone, which sounded like a provocation. "You can't take her away. I'll take her to rest." Chenchuo Ki didn't believe Fu Wenzi's lies. Just now, Fu Wenzi looked at Sci-Wan, as if he wanted to tear Sci-Wan's bones apart and eat him. Chenchuo thought about this, his eyes became sharp. "Do you dare to say that you don't have any selfish intentions? The way you look at Tang Tang is not innocent." Fu Wenzi glanced at Chenchuo and his tone became serious. "What does this have to do with you?" Fu Wenzi didn't like the interference of other people between him and Tang Tang, no matter what the name was. And Chenchuo was afraid that he would seek a short circuit by annoying his friend. You must know that if Fu Wenzi really can't control his lower body and something happens to Sci-Wan, then he really can't look back. He doesn't want to lose two friends at once. Thinking of this, he became even more reluctant to let Fu Wenzi leave. He also called his bodyguards and asked them to take Sci-Wan away. However, Fu Wenzi moved one step ahead of them. He carried Sci-Wan into the car and then left the banquet. Chenchuo looked at the backs of them leaving and had a headache. He scratched his head and said one sentence. "Wow, don't let your imagination run wild, you really have to do something you shouldn't do, otherwise you will mess up the situation where you already have a chance to win." It's a pity that the car was already driving away, and his words did not reach Fu Wenzi's ears. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 279. Chapter 279. Baby, I don't look at my phone. Fu Wenzi hugged Sci-Wan and felt her rubbing against his neck, making him very restless. After all, Sci-Wan has always been restrained and reasonable over the years. Who has ever seen Sci-Wan drunk? She has always lived a very depressed life and has never been unrestrained. Thinking of this, Fu Wenzi looked at Sci-Wan, who kept pulling on him, and there was a rare emotion in his tone. "You just know that you pounce on me, you are sure that I won't bully you, right?" The driver in front opened the partition very professionally without even looking back, leaving the space behind to his employer. "You must know that this young master is in charge of the Fu family and the Pei family now. He didn't want to lose his job at such a young age because he heard something he shouldn't have heard. There are old people above him and young people below, and they all rely on themselves. So it's better to leave it to them to deal with matters like seeing the young master's privacy." Sci-Wan's mind was turning to mush. He didn't even realize what Fu Wenzi said in his ear. He just reached out and grabbed the hem of Fu Wenzi's clothes. She failed to control her strength, and a deep mark was left with one tug. The wrinkles are just like Fu Wenzi's current mood. Confused and intoxicated. Fu Wenzi slowly approached Si-Wan, took a deep breath on Si-Wan's neck, and then spoke. "You're drunk. Drunk cat." His voice was unprecedentedly low and hoarse, even sounding a little dangerous. Like some kind of slimy creature, it is slowly coming to Si-Wan's body, trying to take her as its own. A somewhat depressive atmosphere spread between them. Veins appeared on the backs of Fu Wenzi's hands as he tried his best to suppress himself. But Si-Wan was still close to Fu Wenzi for no apparent reason, trusting him very much and still shouting. "Brothers Hizzy, I'm so hot. I feel so dizzy." There was a rare sticky emotion in his voice, which made Fu Wenzi even more distracted. To be honest, Fu Wenzi has endured very hard for so many years. He was different from Si-Wan, who was indifferent to him. Almost at the age of 18, Fu Wenzi realized his different feelings for Si-Wan. Not only that, he also realized that if he didn't take the initiative in his life, Si-Wan would be able to maintain a relationship with him that was better than ordinary friendship, but would never go further. But Si-Wan was too young at that time. Even now, Si-Wan, who has just grown up, seems very small to Fu Wenzi. She suffered too much when she was a child. Growing up with her parents, she didn't have the most arrogant 5 years. Even now that he is an adult and has been pampered by everyone, Si-Wan still subconsciously feels like he will be abandoned. She was very uneasy. It seems that everyone will leave her. She did not dare to slow down her pace, for fear that if she slowed down a little, the people around her would disappear. Especially Si-Wan, who is about to hand over his company to Si-Wan, giving Si-Wan the feeling that as long as he takes everything into his hands, his father will be far away from him. Si-Wan was worried about his father's health, and at the same time he was worried that after taking over the company, his father would have to accompany his mother. She was still uneasy. Fu Wenzi saw it in his eyes and remembered it in his heart. In private, Fu Wenzi tested Si-Wan more than once, and the answers he received were: "Of course I will be by Tang Tang's side. If I don't stay with her and leave her, what will happen if others bully her? Besides, if I go down so irresponsibly, how can I have the nerve to see Tang Tang's mother in the future? It's weird if she doesn't beat me. Don't think so much, there is no way I can leave Tang Tang." Si-Wan has become a lot more cheerful over the years, and gradually has some of the high-spiritedness of his boyhood. Only Si-Wan has been trapped in place, unable to move. Fu Wenzi never had any good ideas. Si-Wan is like a child put into the body of an adult. But over the years, this child has become more and more skilled at pretending to be an adult. So people ignored her, she never grew up. It was only at this time that Fu Wenzi could feel the nature of a child like Si-Wan. Made him realize that Si-Wan was still relying on him. At this moment, Fu Wenzi's cell phone suddenly rang. When he was about to pick up the phone, Si-Wan, who was disturbed by the ringing of his cell phone, pursed his lips, grabbed Fu Wenzi's cell phone, and was about to throw it out of the window, still mumbling. "Don't look at your phone. Look at me. Wu, you have to look at me. Don't reason with drunk people. Especially I can't reason with Tang Tang who feels aggrieved now." In front of Si-Wan, Fu Wenzi only had one principle, and that was Tang Tang. So he put down his cell phone, held Si-Wan in his arms, and coaxed her gently. "Okay, I won't look at my phone, I'll look at you, you are the best. Baby, I don't look at my phone." Whatever Si-Wan wants, Fu Wenzi will give it to him. Even more, Fu Wenzi gave him more. From the moment he held Si-Wan's hand, Fu Wenzi realized that he would probably be trapped in the shackles called Tang Tang for the rest of his life. He is willing. Si-Wan, on the other hand, grabbed Fu Wenzi's hand and put it around his waist, saying, "Brothers Hizzy. Brothers Hizzy, you have been looking at me. Fu Wenzi smiled, and moved his hand along the back of Si-Wan's head to her neck, then slid all the way down to Si-Wan's waist, and spoke. Don't you know, I can only see you. In his world, the only vivid color is Si-Wan, and there is no one else. Si-Wan tilted his head, his black pupils unfocused. He could tell that his mood was much better than before, and he suddenly leaned forward and came to the side of Fu Wenzi's face. Using an action that the current Si-Wan could not do at all, he kissed Fu Wen. Then he leaned on Fu Wenzi's shoulder and muttered, I know. Brothers Hizzy is the best to me. Fu Wenzi froze. He could avoid Si-Wan's actions, but how could he refuse Tang Tang? So he just froze in place and was successfully sneak attacked by Si-Wan. The hand holding Si-Wan slowly tightened, as if holding a unique treasure in the world. He took a long breath and said resignedly, You are used to pinching me. On the other side, Chen Chuo, who had not answered Fu Wenzi's call, was so anxious that smoke was coming out of his mouth. He was so anxious that he was running around in circles, extremely anxious. He kept talking. MD, answer the phone, what are you two doing? That's not a simple wine. I don't know who the blind person brought the wine to cheer up. If this is not handled properly, people will really die. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 280. Chapter 280. You will be responsible for me, right? Si-Wan in the car just felt that his body was very hot. Besides dizziness, it's just heat. Fortunately, the thing she was holding was very cool, so she couldn't help but want to hold it tighter. I even want to integrate this cold thing into my blood and bones. With great difficulty, the car finally stopped at the hotel nearest to the Fu family. Fu Wenzi looked at Si-Wan, whose clothes were a little messy, put his coat on Si-Wan, and then picked Si-Wan up. The driver who watched them leave wiped the sweat from his forehead, called his boss with a sad face, and said in a tearful voice, Boss, I may be fired. Unexpectedly, his boss heard his voice and said excitedly, Lao Guo. Good luck to you. The headquarters asked you to drive for the CEO. Let me just say that you are lucky, your best days are yet to come. When Lao Guo heard these words, he looked at the back of his boss as if he had just woken up from a dream. He felt that it really made sense for a young boss to be so popular among the people. You can eat meat by following the boss. Lao Guo thought firmly. Then he drove the car away. He understands. No matter whether I can use the car tomorrow or not, I have to say that the car is broken. As to why it was broken, that means someone needs the car to break down. Fu Wenzi carried Si-Wan into his private room on the top floor without any obstruction. After that, he pressed the room service button. Don't make any noise, be quiet, and don't go upstairs without my request. After saying that, he pressed the button. Si-Wan was very uncomfortable after being put on the bed by Fu Wenzi. It's hot. Si-Wan twisted his body, trying to get rid of the discomfort in his body. But no matter what she did, it was like a furnace was burning inside her body. It was extremely uncomfortable. Fu Wenzi pressed the button and the curtains closed automatically. He stretched out his hand, wanting to hug Si-Wan and take her to wash up. However, Si-Wan felt the coolness and directly stretched out his arms to hug Fu Wenzi and put it against his face. Muttered in a low voice, it feels so comfortable. Cool. When Fu Wenzi heard Si-Wan's almost coquettish words, he paused for a moment, then squatted down, looked into Si-Wan's eyes, and said, Does Tang Tang still know who I am? Si-Wan was so familiar with Fu Wenzi's voice that he almost replied without thinking, Brothers Hizzy. To be honest, it has been a long time since Fu Wenzi heard Si-Wan call him Brothers Hizzy. Maybe it's because Si-Wan's personality is a little reserved, so now he can't speak out. Fu Wenzi had some regrets before. But now that I heard Siwan calling him so naturally, I felt that maybe Siwan had called him countless times in his heart. He wanted to withdraw his hand and hug Siwan. Siwan will not be happy when he wakes up tomorrow morning if he goes to bed smelling of alcohol. It's not a big deal to lose his temper, but Fu Wenzi doesn't like Siwan and is unhappy. However, as soon as he made his first move, he was held down by Siwan. Siwan hugged Fu Wenzi's waist and pressed his hot face against Fu Wenzi's shirt. The temperature suddenly reached Fu Wenzi's boil. The temperature is a bit high. Fu Wenzi was sweating a little. He turned on the air conditioner, but still restrained himself and did not attack Siwan. But his voice became hoarse. Tang Tang, let's go wash up, okay? Then sleep well, and you won't feel hot when you sleep. Siwan, however, shook his head and refused to let go. He even put his hand excessively into Fu Wenzi's clothes. Sighed comfortably. Every part of Siwan's body was deadly poison to Fu Wenzi. He was intoxicated with almost no resistance. Fu Wenzi closed his eyes and let Siwan absorb the coldness from his body. But his whole body became tense, with faint veins appearing between his neck, showing restraint. However, Siwan was not satisfied anymore. She took Fu Wenzi's hand, put it on her face, and asked in a low voice, "Aren't you going to hug me?" How can that be possible? How could Fu Wenzi endure it? In front of Siwan, he was almost defeated. Fu Wenzi knelt in front of Siwan and gently untied the obstructive dress. His movements were very gentle, for fear that if he moved too much, he would hurt the person he had loved as his treasure for so many years. Fu Wenzi was awake, but the person in his arms was not. So he is willing to accept the punishment after Siwan wakes up, and he can bear everything. He grabbed Siwan's hand and put it on his body. His voice was hoarse and low, "I'll give you whatever you want." Siwan was in a state of confusion, and in his mind he could only translate the message that the other party would give him anything. So she acted on instinct. It's hard to say who made the first move. Between them, it was like two waning moons finally turning into a complete circle. Siwan heard those familiar low and hoarse sounds, like cello playing, which sounded very nice and she wanted to hear more. So he stretched out his hand, pressed Fu Wenzi's Adam's apple, put his thin lips to Fu Wenzi's ear, and said with a sticky ending, "Brothers, his voice is very nice." Like. Fu Wenzi's hands clenched into fists and did not dare to fall on Siwan's body. Her body looked like fine white jade under the dim moonlight. The grievances and injuries I suffered as a child have disappeared under the care of love for more than 10 years. Hauntedly beautiful. Siwan refused to give up. He grabbed the decorative ribbon next to him and tied Fu Wenzi's hands in a mess. Then he sat on him and looked down at Fu Wenzi with a lazy expression. "Brothers Hizzy, you are also beautiful. Fu Wenzi is also good looking and exquisite. His body proportions are very good and he never gives up on body management. The inverted triangle figure with wide shoulders and narrow waist, combined with the shoulder-length wolf tail, creates an indescribable contrast." Siwan grabbed the tail of Fu Wenzi's hair hard, causing Fu Wenzi to raise his head, then looked into Fu Wenzi's eyes and pressed it down. Fu Wenzi's hand subconsciously wanted to break free from the restraints on his hand, but he was afraid of hurting Siwan, so he suppressed his movements. Everything is left to Siwan. The turbid smell of alcohol between the two seemed to ignite something beyond the boundaries they thought were safe. The fireworks outside rose into the night sky, and then a beautiful flower bloomed. Siwan slowly moved away, their thin lips still glistening with water. No one spoke, and the atmosphere was somewhat ambiguous. In the end, Fu Wenzi couldn't help but lost the battle and said weakly, "You will be responsible for me, right?" Siwan hugged Fu Wenzi as if making a silent invitation. Also seems to answer unchanged. The night is still very long, and there is plenty of time to appreciate it carefully. Chen Shuo, whose phone was about to explode, pulled off his messy clothes and prepared to rush forward. But was stopped. If Mr. Chen really can't go up, Xiaofu will always be angry. End of this chapter.